Welcome to the Ask a Cycling Coach podcast presented by TrainerRoad. Today we are going to talk about ketones. We're going to talk about back pain. We're going to talk about fat loss, creatine, and also some hot takes. We've got Ivy with us, Ivy Audrain. We've got our CEO, Nate Pearson. It's going to be a great one. Let's just roll into it. Grant says, I used to be a member of TrainerRoad a long time ago, and I felt it brought me success. Since then, I took a break from triathlon, and then 2 years ago, I made a comeback. As a sports science lecturer, that means that, Grant's I feel like, Grant, you're speaking down to me over here. So you probably know more about this stuff than I do.
Yeah, we better get our facts straight.
Yikes. As a sports science lecturer, I'm quite lucky to be on the pulse with recent trends in nutrition. My question relates to exogenous ketones, but not the super expensive ones that come in shot bottles like Delta G. I've found a few powders that are of a more reasonable price, around 50 euros. And yeah, you can find powders online. If you go on Amazon, you look for ketone powders, you can find ketone monoesters in powder form that you can mix into things. I have not tried them, so I don't know what the taste is like. I don't know if it's any better. But just the same, you can find them and it's cheaper. My question is linked to timing, though. I quite like the science behind the benefits of ketones. So should I consume the ketone supplement during the winter period, or is it something that is worth saving until spring, summer? Also, what are your views on pre and post consumption and benefit to training? I must say, I'm glad to be getting back to TrainerRoad, and it's good to see that the podcast is even better since I left. I really appreciate all the time you guys put into making this one and the best training podcast out there.
Thanks Grant.
Yeah, it's awesome, right? Can we recap ketones really quick? I went through the research as it stands right now, the most recent research I could find, studies from 2023 and 2022 for updates on it. Because Nate, do you still take them?
No, I've spent thousands of dollars on ketones though. So I have my own. They're expensive. They were, it was causing a shortage. Every workout I was doing ketones for a while, but you say your stuff and I'll say my experience.
Well, did you feel a benefit, Nate, from it?
I think I did on really long sweet spot stuff, like 2 hour sweet spot workouts, but it's hard to tell because I did so many things at once, like prepping for Cape Epic, so many carbs, and I just I'd stack caffeine on it, and confounding variables were very high in my anecdotal experience. One thing it did do though is that I had the liquid ketone esters that taste like nail polish. Heartburn,
oh my God.
incredible. Heartburn would last with me, I think, for months afterwards. I started taking Alka-Seltzer and stuff to try to combat it.
From the ketones, you think?
Yeah, for sure from the ketones. It got to the point where I drink water and that would give me heartburn. So
Yikes.
it was bad. I stopped that and it went away. But that was, watch out for that. That's a whole other thing is if you can't eat during a race or can't eat at the other times, the benefits of having them.
Ketones, but no food.
And I don't even know if they're really supposed to help a lot with sweet spot, but if it does shift that ratio to more fat burning during it, maybe that would help. And I know we did a whole podcast on this too, on the science of getting faster, which will be interesting. I'm sure you'll cover that. And anyways, I don't want to spoil. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. Ivy, what were you going to say?
I was just going to ask, Nate, do you think you're sensitive to placebo? How sensitive do you think you are to it?
I don't know. I think I'm actually the opposite, where I don't think that they work. A lot of things. I didn't get any benefit from beetroot juice. Rubbing lotion on my legs didn't help me.
Bicarb lotion? You mean? Yeah.
Clean bike though does work. That makes you climb faster.
Lotion on my legs always helps. Not the bicarb stuff. It just makes my legs look good. And when my legs look good, I feel good and I go good. I'm fully on board the placebo train.
But if the placebo works, if I put out 10 extra watts and it's a placebo, then I will pay for that placebo.
Yeah.
I don't think I am, but I could be. Who's self-aware enough to really know if a placebo really impacts them? Because then it would be a placebo.
Right.
Yes.
Yep, that's true.
As Nate mentioned, there's a podcast that you all should check out, and we're going to link below. It's from the Science of Getting Faster podcast, and it's with Dr. Kyle Poffet. And that podcast looked into ketones and bicarbonate and a unique combination that perhaps when you combine the both of them, you actually do get some benefits that are unique. To Nate's point, confounding variables, maybe they are compounding variables instead of confounding at times. So I do want to go through the basic just goals of ketones, the whole premise here. It's an alternate fuel source for your body to rely upon. Ketones are in and of themselves, and we create these within our body. Theoretically, if we have that alternative fuel source, it could enable higher performance or perhaps more sustainable performance. The key thing is that the theory is that it could help us spare glycogen. So in other words, we're using another fuel source instead of using glycogen. And when we use glycogen, that creates lactate. Lactate causes a chain of events that could then impair performance or at least shorten your ability to perform at the exact same level. So that's the whole reason behind this and why people want to take them. You can enter ketosis through a ketogenic diet. The results vary widely in terms of different people's ability to enter ketosis or stay in ketosis, and it seems like it's highly individual. So then there's exogenous ketones, or ketones you can drink in most cases, or these powders that you can mix in. It's kind of like brute forcing ketosis, and you can push it in there. Your body's getting those ketones. It has those as fuel, and that's what it could use. There's two different things. Nate,
I want to say too, like the benefit of that theoretically is supposed to be that you can train with carbs and have all the benefits of your high intensity workouts, but then you can get into ketosis at certain times, kind of just by taking a magic elixir, and then have the benefits of that, of burning more fat or going longer or something, like that. And we had another podcast too with Dr. Podlegar. They had a test where they would have athletes use it for like 2 or 3 hours, I think, as endurance. And then when it was worn off, like, could they finish at more watts at the end of the race, thinking that like, oh, these Grand Tour riders, they're going to use it for like 3 or 4 hours, and at the end not use it, and then have all that glycogen stored. Are you going to cover that, or should we spoil it right now?
We can spoil it right now. Go ahead.
It didn't work.
No, it didn't work. No, unfortunately. And this kind of gets at the meat of Grant's question. Grant, there's not research right now on periodized utilization of ketones that I've been able to find, which would be really interesting to see that, to see if you can do that. From what I have seen, at least from some research and also just anecdotally from different people citing this, is that using exogenous ketones or taking in ketones doesn't mean that you're suddenly ketogenic and will be in that state afterward. Like, it's not like it shifts your body toward maintaining a state of ketosis, but rather it introduces ketones. You can use those ketones, and that's what it is. But it doesn't like shift you into a state of ketosis in any way that is sustainable beyond once you've used those ketones. In terms of your question, I don't have a scientific answer yet in terms of when you should use it in your training phase and when you should use it, whether it's even like before or after exercise. We'll get into that in a little bit. There's a bit more science on that. But in terms of periodization, there isn't a whole lot. However, right now, the way it's being used is in performance. Like, athletes are using it, but not all athletes across the board, and we'll get to that in a second. But some athletes swear by using it intra-race or intra-workout. And typically, as they get closer to their goal event, that's like the time when they want to use it. For example, during the Tour de France, there is somebody that has been mentioned many times on the podcast who is serving as an advisor to World Tour teams, who provided some inside information on this. And when they provided this inside information on this, they said that not all athletes use it, and they typically spare it for like the main goal stage. That day, that rider wants to win that stage, and that's what they're going out and that's what they're using it for. But here's the tricky thing. So I just want to cover the basics of like the most recent research.
Wait, what are you talking about? Can we? Right.
Yeah.
Is it?
So,
who?
Yeah, who?
I don't want to say just because they didn't want to.
Yeah, okay.
He who must not be named. They said they don't want to be revealed, so they just wanted to show that. Because then you can tie that into the athlete, and then if you tied it into the athlete, then perhaps that's divulging information and everything else. So, anyways,
Forum, figure it out.
Yeah, there we go.
I'm just joking.
Yeah. But anyways, I want to cover the recent research. So there was an interesting paper. And first of all, the research, just spoiler alert, it's on like en masse, it's not positive for ketones. It's showing that there isn't any sort of potential performance benefit for endurance athletes when you look beyond very, very small studies. Very small studies with 1, 2, 3 subjects, something like that. You might see, yes, that indeed it does improve performance, but if you have anything larger than that, it's not the case. And we'll get into a meta-analysis in a bit and a systematic review. But in 2023, McCarthy and colleagues, they had a study called Acute Ketone Monoester Supplementation Impairs 20-Minute Time Trial Performance in Trained Cyclists. They had 23 healthy adults, VO2 max average of around 62, so they were fit folks. They were all above 50 in terms of VO2 max, and their age was in between 18 and 60. And I really, really wish that they would have tied in some sort of correlation between age, but you couldn't see the results per individual age subject. That would have been really cool to see, but it wasn't in there. So maybe that's future research that could be done. That would be cool. But all these athletes have been training chronically more than 5 hours per week recently coming into this. It was a randomized crossover triple-blinded trial. So that's a really good structure that they put in place. Ketone versus placebo is what they drank. And then they did a 20-minute TT. They measured RPE, power, and heart rate. In RPE, there was zero difference between ketone versus placebo. In heart rate, ketone, the people that took ketones had 2 beats per minute lower, but also their power was 6 watts lower, 2.3% lower. And this actually represents the majority of the research that we're seeing now when it's a well-structured study that involves more than just a few athletes. It shows actually a slight performance decrement with ketones on average for most athletes, that it doesn't help with endurance performance, strangely. And this is backed up in 2022. Brooks and colleagues, they did a meta-analysis, and it was in a systematic review. It was called Acute Ingestion of Ketone Monoesters and Precursors Do Not Enhance Endurance Exercise Performance, a systematic review and meta-analysis. And really quick, monoesters and then precursors, those two things. So ketone monoesters are ketones, you drink them, they go into your body, your liver processes them, boom, you've got the fuel and you're all good. Precursors, you take them and they're basically the ingredients for your body to create ketones. You take those in and it creates it. It takes longer for the ketones to be created and then to be utilized for your body. But in this case, the systematic review looked at both. They whittled everything down and they were only able to have 8 studies that had solid enough, or I should say match the criteria that they had with sample size and with proper controls and everything else. But out of these 8 studies, they had 80 participants, 77 men and 3 women. So very gender lopsided, also worth keeping in mind. They did human randomized crossover or parallel controlled trials. They focused on exercise performance. They had to use ketone monoesters or precursors, and they had to take it pre-workout or intra-workout ingestion. And the studies using animal models, ketogenic diets, ketone diesters, and ketone salts were excluded. The results, all studies reported an increase in blood ketone levels. So yes, that part is working, but no significant difference between control and ketone groups across all studies.
Okay.
So like, scientific definition of your mileage may vary, but not likely to improve.
I would say though, in the first one, the 20-minute time trial, they're testing the wrong thing, because I don't take ketones to increase my 20-minute TT power. I take it to go longer, and have not have glycogen, like at Leadville, right? To not have glycogen issues really far in the race, which is super. I mean, I'm usually skeptic on products and stuff, but it's really hard to test that, right? To go like to the point of losing. That's what Ivy might be getting to that point too, to get to that point of glycogen going away. And sounds like they need a muscle biopsy. No, just kidding. Actually, that probably would. I mean, seriously, that might help. Before and after, right? A certain wattage. I wonder if you could do that. No, that you can't measure glycogen. That's just muscle fiber types. I don't know what I'm thinking about. Unless you can, I don't know. But anyways, I would think people on the ketosis diets, I can't think of the word right now, but they have the same experience where your ketogenic diets, where your heart rate's lower, but actually the power output is lower. And that's why it's normally not advised for, dynamic cycling, because you're not going to be able to put out as much power. If you're doing like a 20-hour race or something, maybe so. But this question, I wonder if like during some base phase or like lower intensity training, you could go longer and get some more aerobic improvements, and then later on stop and switch to the more high carb, stuff, or even during the week, right? Sorry, Ivy, go ahead.
I think we maybe didn't say what the point of taking ketones should be for athletes, which is to help an athlete consume carbohydrates that last longer during an activity without having to refuel. So as Nate said, like having to do with glycogen and how much you need to refuel. So in that sense...
Well, here's the deal. Though. That's like the idea, but then you have pro athletes, very famously, this has been like referenced. They take their ketone bottle when they're going up the last climb on Alpe d'Huez in the Tour. Mm-hmm. And that's like so we have this anecdotal evidence of like these athletes that are using this in a way that doesn't jive with how we would anticipate it being used in terms of glycogen sparing to allow prolonged performance at a specific endurance level that isn't, or a specific level that isn't high.
Pro teams used to pump their tires up to like 200 PSI too.
Exactly.
Just because they do it doesn't mean that it's good. And I wonder, every time I think of pro teams and there's something public about what they do and it's very special and they say, this is the thing. I always I would lie. If I was like the head of a coach, I'd be like, say you're doing this, like the opposite of whatever you should be doing, and tell the world that this is why we won.
Right.
I don't know why, because they're so like want to win, right? Why would they
tell them we only eat lettuce during the tour? Yeah. Tell them
like Chris Froome's like, I just have this no carb day in the middle of the core. That's how because he showed a picture of himself eating like avocado and egg whites. That's not what they eat every day. But that's what I would do if I was if you're to mess with the other team, right? Like,
yeah. Here's the interesting thing to your point, Ivy, in terms of what it would be used for, and back to the periodization question. This is what the research would be able to figure out for us, is if you are indeed sparing glycogen through using ketone supplementation during a ride, is that actually shifting fat substrate utilization if you are not using ketones in subsequent rides? Like, is it truly temporary? Kind of like, caffeine or anything else. Is it something that truly has its effect right then, or does it shift something beyond that? And that would be the really interesting thing that would be really cool to see researched, right?
Well, we know based upon Nate's heartburn that it certainly doesn't just go away when you stop using it. Poor Nate.
I tried some ketones again 3 months ago. And they were the HVMN ones. They do not sponsor us in any way. It's just the ones that I'd tried before, and I tried them again. They do not taste as bad as they used to taste at all. The flavor is different. I think they're called Ketone IQ now is like the brand they go under, but it's essentially the same brand. Because last time it really did just taste like rubbing alcohol. And for an N=1 experience, once again, N=1, I took these on 4 different rides. And in every situation on all 4, after I took them, it felt like somebody shut off glycolysis in my body. Like I felt 100% bonked after taking these things, give myself 15, 20, 30 minutes into a steady like endurance day when I would be doing 3 or 4 hour rides, something like that. And I felt like no matter how many carbs I took in, no matter what I did after that, just wasn't working anymore. When I took it recently and 3 months ago, same exact experience, which I thought was, reassuring, at least because I feel kind of crazy saying that, because most people that I speak to say, oh, I feel like it's like jet fuel and it works really well. But once again, placebo is a really powerful thing. And I'm very skeptical of all these things. And I think that flies in the face of the placebo effect many times.
They say they say that it's jet fuel because it tastes like jet fuel. And so they think, in their mind that it's jet fuel.
I think I have like 40 in my office that, if you want to test it again, just
I wonder if they expired. Does rubbing alcohol expire?
I don't think so. It's good for centuries. This would be a very hard study to do, but how I would use it just based on how they say it should work is on my TrainerRoad endurance days, I would take it, and maybe that would spare some glycogen for the hard days that are, maybe after endurance day or a couple days before, so I can hit those harder days harder, but I can still get the aerobic benefit and utilize fat more on those endurance days and then not take it on the other days. I wonder if anyone, if anyone's tried that and has anecdote, which, the plural of anecdote is not data. Please put that in the YouTube comments or in the forum. It'd just be interesting. There's so many like variables that would be, that'd be really hard to figure out performance and how hard the workouts is. And that would be really hard to do.
Even when doing what you suggested on endurance days, you'd have to be so calculated and controlling, like making sure every endurance day is the same while you do that, same amount of calories for breakfast, same timing before your ride, same like sleep and lead up into that endurance day, like a lot of controlled variables to see, to really.
Then afterwards.
Yeah, exactly.
And afterwards too, how many carbs are you eating between that and the next hard workout? And then how hard is that hard workout for you? Because all out too is even hard based on motivation. It'd be really hard to do.
Yeah. This references the last podcast episode we just published with Sarah and I was talking about the study at the end where basically our researchers were asking out, they were just pleading, Rosenblatt in particular was just saying, if you're going to do exercise intervention studies like this, you have to have big sample sizes, and doing that is very difficult. Yes, to control all those things, but you have to, because it's also individually variable. Grant, getting directly to your question, if it was me and assuming that ketones didn't have this seemingly detrimental effect on me that they do, assuming that they didn't, I would be using ketones very early on. And I would try to be using those in the base phase in particular to be able to shift substrate utilization, assuming that works. I don't know if it does work, but that would be my intention in terms of using them. And simply, you'd have to view it in the appropriate context, though, because once you get into harder workouts and everything else, there's this obsession with utilizing it with sparing glycogen and using fat, but there's also being able to rip through a ton of glucose really quickly is very beneficial. And that is something that gets trained later on as you get closer to your specialty phase and everything else. So if you found yourself in a situation where you were using ketones and you're sparing glycogen and you're doing that, and you push that too long, and once again, we're operating in a theoretical world because I don't see any scientific studies yet. And please, if you find them, put them down below because I may have missed them. But I wouldn't want that to fly in the face of my ability to just become a fire hose of glycogen that could just drain super fast, right?
The way I think about it, and it's really hit me, is that in cycling, unless it's triathlon, the times that people win races are usually the person who can burn the most glycogen the fastest.
Right.
Efficiency is part of that equation too. But, it's these really small, under 10-minute usually places that like really cause the race to happen. And of course, you'd say, well, like that study that Pogacar did, let's see if we could store all that glycogen. But it sounds like they maybe stored more, but then they weren't able to burn it as fast, and their fire couldn't be as fast burning. So that's why too, the people talk about the ketogenic diet for a dynamic sport like cycling. You don't want to inhibit that ability to burn as much as you can. And if you're going really long, like I said, ultra distance runner, ultra distance cycling, even I think in triathlon, it was at Ironman distance, even for age groupers, it's like when you get up to the 16, 17 hour, it could go either way, but shorter than that, it's better to be not ketogenic as far as the research that I understand is. And I don't have anything personally against, I love carbs, but I don't have anything against the ketogenic diet. I know it's good for like epilepsy, believe that's the way that it was developed. Yeah. And
there's a lot of different ties
Uses
into it. And that's the interesting thing, Nate. Like just this year at Ironman World Championships, the pace that these age groupers are holding, and I know it's World Championships, so I know it's like we're dealing with the cream of the crop, but still, oh my gosh, they're so fast. Like where they're operating is like 80% FTP. Like, they're 75 to 80% FTP. And some of them, I don't know, with weird fractional utilization might even be higher and it might be sustainable for them. But it's really impressive to see how high intensity even Ironman sort of stuff is. So, but yeah, I could see that. Now, ketones as recovery is another thing where I'm seeing them marketed big time. Recovery studies are really tough, like kind of like what you talked about, Nate. What are you doing before? What are you doing after? Individual variability is absolutely at play and everything else. And I couldn't find anything conclusive that shows that that even looked into that and found that ketones are beneficial. It's always before or during the workout is where I've seen it taken. Mm-hmm. And this honestly kind of reminds me of the sodium bicarbonate pathway, like in terms of the development, not scientific pathway in the body, but the developmental and narrative pathway, where it was like, you put this on your skin, it'll help you process and buffer lactate so you can do a lot of hard efforts. And then it was like, well, this will help you go longer on hard days. And then it was like, well, this will help you recover. And it's the thing is, and I'm not saying that sodium bicarbonate doesn't work for any of that stuff. It likely does. Whether it's absorbed through the skin or not is another issue entirely. And check out the YouTube video I'll put down below where I went deep into sodium bicarbonate and its effects on us. But with studies, it's hard to prove this stuff. Mm-hmm. It gets really difficult to prove it all the time because we're really complex, Right.
And for someone like Grant who, is price conscious about stuff like this, if, they're talking about expensive ones, I found a less expensive one, if we don't have concrete proof that this is effective and will help your performance, don't you think that Grant's money would be better allocated for something like a good massage from a PT or a TrainerRoad subscription, things and things that, we know will measurably help your performance or well-being that we know to be true versus something we're not really sure of,
Little TR plugs here. 90-minute massage is a year of TrainerRoad. Like,
it's pretty crazy.
Also, you talked about small sample sizes. In the next podcast, I'm just going to commit myself right now, so I actually do it. Do a little product update with some behind the scenes stuff. But you talk about small sample size. Our ML team, when we look at stuff, I've been working with them more lately, and there's things that are like, okay, we have 600,000 cases of this with all of this data around it. And now what we do is we can pull out performance things from that and tease out the metrics because there's so many confounding variables of different things that can happen. How frequent you're riding, your history of riding, your age, your sex, your other sports you're doing, your running. Like there's so many things, and your heart rate. And what's really cool, we talk about red light, green light. That is going to come out pretty soon here, just going to be part of adaptive training. And right now at the beginning, it's like an algorithm approach about how much training you've been doing. But there is a secondary approach being done, I just saw it, which is all machine learning based that predicts your performance on a day. And it's nuts. It is so cool. Like the ML team, they were kind of upset because they got pretty close to it, but they weren't like perfectly predicting performance. But they got the outlier cases like 95% of the time. So therefore, if the ride is, we predict it's going to be too easy for you, it really was too easy. And if we think that it's going to crush you based on something you've done recently or been like really hard when it should be really hard, we got that like almost perfect, really close to performance. We're putting a couple more things in it to be more accurate, but I want to get that out and replace this other part that's not even out yet as soon as possible, because it is, I don't know, you've done it where you do too much and then the next day, gets you. That's what I really want to put in and have that upgraded version. And again, it'll just look like part of adaptive training. Your adaption will just come in and it will change. But it's super exciting to be able to have, but we have like 200 million plus activities in our database, so that allows us to do these really big machine learning analyses of people where we don't have exact control of how many carbs and all that stuff to eat. But if you look at a huge population of hundreds of thousands or millions, you get to see trends. And what machine learning does is advanced statistics. So it says, if people have these sorts of things, it's more likely that they'll have this outcome. And then it will have a percentage, well, depending on what kind of technique you're using, but like of how it might categorize things and saying these people are usually this thing. And then we can then show that in the app. Of course, it's never like 100% that we will say, hey, this workout's going to be too easy, so I'm going to give you a harder one and we'll complete. That's impossible, but we could greatly improve what we have today. And I think what anyone has, human coach or not coach, about how well you're going to be doing.
To proactively instead of like reactively, like, whoops, that was too hard, or like, oh yeah, let's change this. Like, I have an idea of what this is going to be like and how it can be better. Like, I can't think of another training model or even a coach that would be able to do that. Or you can get a 90-minute massage. I don't know, whatever.
And we make adjustments already, but not like these large sweeping ones that might be because of something else happening previously in the week of a series of data, like a series of data points that come in that are too complex for us humans to understand. That is the really cool part.
Yeah. I'm excited. Tune in for next week's podcast. It's going to be great stuff.
Grant, welcome back to Trainer Road.
Yes. And go to trainerroad.com. If you're listening to this now, some features will likely already be out. Some other features that Nate didn't even talk about. So
big one.
We'll see.
It should be. So really if you're listening to this podcast, well, I don't know what you should do. It should be better be out. Hopefully it's out today.
Awesome. Okay, let's go into Jacob's question before we reveal anything else. Jacob says, I just completed the little sugar. Actually, hold on. Before we do this, we need everybody that has tried ketones. Let us know how you performed. Nate kind of asked for that, but I just want to hit that home. Let us know if they helped. And if you haven't tried ketones, if you want to try them at that cost, that sort of thing, man, like regular ketone supplementation is probably cheaper to hire a personal assistant to be able to handle all the scheduling that would allow you to train consistently with TrainerRoad. Like, it's like, it's expensive stuff. So Jacob says, I just completed the Little Sugar 100 MTB race and it hurt. I missed that by like 4 days. I was in Bentonville for a USAC coaching clinic and I missed that one. I want to go and do that race. That looks like an absolute blast. Super fun. And Bentonville is really, really, really cool. If anyone hasn't been there and you're a mountain biker, my gosh, it's Disneyland. So it's surreal. So Truman Show. But it wasn't my legs. They say that the reason that the race hurt wasn't their legs. I have to thank TrainerRoad's Marathon XC program for having me prepared for the effort and being able to finish with a time of 7 hours and 12 minutes. It's impressive.
That's solid.
67 miles of constant on. Like the terrain there is never straight. It's left or right at all times and up or down at all times. It's like, you never get a chance to rest. And there's so many spots, like little spots where you can flat if you're not really sharp in terms of where you're handling your bike, because the rocks are really sharp there. So super impressive job. Way to go, 712. So I got a puncture and I wasted too much time at the aid station. But the big thing was my back and hands were destroyed during and after the race. My back started hurting at about mile 25 and the hands were toast after the race. Or after mile 50. Before the race, I set my bike suspension pressures about 5 PSI higher front and back because I thought all the extra gear I was carrying needed to counter for that with that extra adjustment in PSI. I thought about this and regretted doing it for about 5 hours during the race as the pain set in. Is there any bike setup tips for marathon rides, like maybe lowering suspension PSI or slowing rebound to help with hand and back fatigue? I ride an Epic Evo, so I have a little extra travel to work with. Are there any hand and back strengthening exercises you would all recommend? Or is it just a normal do bigger rides and your body will get used to it? And lastly, doing high-speed jump trails with the massive braking bumps after 55 miles of riding brought tears to my eyes and curse words from my mouth. That wasn't a very nice course designer. Okay. Oh man, suspension part, first of all, if I can just say 5 PSI is a lot. If you change, I know 5 PSI might not be a lot on tires, but you change that in suspension, it's huge because you're dealing with like a really small space. In your suspension, you aren't filling up your whole fork leg with air. There's a tiny little reservoir inside your fork that is the air spring, right? And it's a small little space. And when you add in 5 PSI in a small space like that, it has profound impacts. Shock, it's even smaller. So 5 PSI, you probably went from being smooth over all those bumps to having like a perfectly detailed topographical map of every bump you went over for that whole race. And your back is where that all registered, which probably sucked. So my suspension does not fluctuate more than 1 to 2 PSI all year, depending on hard hitting trails. If it's a really hard like trail with big hits, I'll go up 1 or 2 PSI. If it's a trail where it's like a bunch of small chundery rock that I'm constantly dealing with small bumps, but nothing like a huge hit, I might drop 1 PSI. But that's like the max that I do. So 5 PSI does seem extreme, at least on the bike setup side. And then on bike setup, run suspension tokens. This is the sort of thing, if you're in a long race, add one more volume spacer or token, however you want to say it, into your suspension in the front and rear. And what that's going to do is that's going to make the top part of your travel extra plush. And then it's going to make it so you still don't bottom out. So that can be a really helpful thing to take the edge off the bumps on those sort of things on big days like that. So that's what I would say there. If anything, drop tire pressure, not suspension pressure. So yeah.
That token, why would the reason you not want to always run that because it would impact pedaling efficiency?
Yeah, there's 2 different things. Like number one, it might make it so that you sag too low all the time. So then your bike is either in a weird position, but then also it makes it so that bikes are now designed really well so that in a certain position of the travel, the bike will pedal really efficiently. But if you get lower than that, it will lose its efficiency and start to kind of bob around. And every time you put energy into your pedals, it's going to just suck it up with suspension movement. So that's kind of why you wouldn't want to do that. The other reason too is sometimes you want a bike to be a bit more sprightly. And for most cross-country Olympic races here in the United States, you want your bike to sit a little higher in the travel and be a bit more supportive off the top instead of supple. The reason for that is because they're typically really smooth courses, except for like 1 or 2 spots where there's like a drop. But other than that, it's really smooth. So you don't want it to be soft and plush. You want it to be a bit stiffer.
I mean, either way, it sounds like Jacob knew what worked for them and decided to change it at the last minute because they thought they were had all their gear with them. And my assumption is that, at hour 5 of 7 of this race, Jacob was like, maybe this is why I'm feeling this way and my back is hurting because I made this pressure change. And I just want to urge athletes when you're in this scenario, I know there's neutral mechanic support on courses like this, like take the 5 minutes to stop and get them to change the pressure for you versus spending the next 2 hours fixating on it and continuing to be miserable and losing so much more time because you didn't just stop and change this,
It's like the rock in your shoe.
Point.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
4 hours.
Just stop
so
and
can't
get
wait.
it out. Yeah.
When I have back pain, it's usually because my handlebars are too low. And if Jacob were to increase 5 PSI pressure, might they not be sagging as much and then thus leaning over more pressure on your hands, and thus your hands are also messed up. Because it's, that's what, could that be it?
Yeah, because like 5 PSI front and back isn't going to have the same effect, right, Nate? Like it might make your bike then ride like a stink bug. And then if that's the case, then there's more pressure on there. Also, a hydration pack is like more weight over the back. So perhaps you would want to put a bit more pressure in the back than the front. But I'm just going through and looking at like the specialized suspension calculator, and I'm adding on an additional, like for example, all the extra gear you were carrying compared to a normal ride is probably really going to add up to like 1.5 to 2.5 pounds. Like 2.5 pounds would be quite a lot compared to a normal ride. Like now you're carrying something else in addition to that. You're probably already carrying stuff as is. And in that case, the change in suspension, at least for the PSI, for my bike at least, and for in this case also Jacob's bike, it's less than 1 PSI. It's not changing for me. So it's not like you have to, oh man, I'm carrying a ton of weight and I have to change that. I would probably look at just bigger volume tires that you can run a little less pressure in. That will make things a bit softer, and then not changing your suspension dramatically, not making it stiffer. But the main thing I feel like on these rides is you're in a race. It's super tense. That course, again, you're always on. It's never like you can just relax. Like at Leadville, for example, you have like these long descents or road sections or something else, and you can kind of stretch and relax your back a bit, move a little bit, even like sit up from your bars. And I don't think there's a single spot on Little Sugar where you could like sit up because it's single track winding nonstop. So in those situations, it's a foreign environment perhaps than what you're used to. But Nate, I remember you talking about just incorporating deadlifts, I believe, and how much that helped your back. Because you were struggling with back pain a ton on the road bike, right? And mountain bike?
A ton. Yeah. And I would do high rep, 20, 30 rep deadlifts, which hasn't done a lot, but that was huge. And you make a big point. If you're out of the saddle, like, and you're hinging mountain biking, your back is engaged. Like your lower back is there. I remember just in Leadville going down Columbine and trying to be hinged and could not. I would just try to sit up, and it was so dangerous going, I don't know, 30 something down a dirt road.
Yeah. Ivy, what stands out to you because of cyclocross too? That's like back pain. You hear that a ton from people, and it's usually because they're like putting out huge power, going up these super steep climbs and doing that sort of thing, which very well could be happening for Jacob.
And what stands out to me is that Jacob, asks, are there any hand or strengthening, back strengthening exercises you recommend, or just the normal, do bigger rides and your body will get used to it? I don't think that's the answer for someone like Jacob. It's like, just because I do a 7-hour XC ride once doesn't mean that I'm prepared and, physically able to do it. I think that doing what Nate is suggesting and making sure that your core and it's a more like a frequency in stimuli that you're getting used to versus just doing like one big ride or peppering in a big ride every once in a while. Like doing something like that isn't going to prepare you. Just like binge studying for a test one time isn't going to prepare you for it, like breaking it up and
my degree says different.
Oh man.
Long term though, it's probably not good for like retention of knowledge, everything else, right? I mean, that's what you're getting at. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. My point is, like, I think that making sure that you're physically prepared for that constant on stimuli at a shorter duration more consistently will better prepare you than just being like, I got to just do this once a 7-hour ride. And then I'll know what it feels like. And then my body will be ready. It doesn't work like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Strength training, man. That's like the main thing that pops up to me in terms of what sort of strength training. We did a great podcast with Dialed Health. You can check that one out with Derek Teal. That was like a full deep dive on all the different things and a lot of questions from athletes. And if you haven't listened to that one, go listen to it again with this fresh perspective, Jacob, of like my hands hurt and my back hurt at this race. Because we had a specific section where we talked all about back pain and what to do with back pain, different exercises that could help with it, the whole thing. So even like equipment that you can get to help with those exercises.
John, for the hands hurting, I think you told me once to like, you grip at like it's a paper towel or a toilet paper kind of piece of cardboard, because I would guess in a course like this at Bentonville, you could be gripping really hard the whole time because it's very dynamic. And could he be over gripping?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And you're probably over gripping too if you've got weird suspension changes that are putting more weight on the front. If you put 5 PSI in the rear, that's going to jack your back end up more than it will your front, which probably puts more weight on the front, which then puts more pressure on your hands. So yeah, totally. And in that case too, like with the hand exercises, Derek talks about them, but farmer's carries, that sort of thing for a cyclist is hugely productive. Like grabbing heavy kettlebells or dumbbells and walking with them and working so that you should grab something that's heavy enough so that it's hard for you to hold on to and you're having to use a lot of strength. And you walk for a short period of time, you drop them, you turn around and you pick them up and you walk back and you just repeatedly do those sort of things. That can help for sure. And that's a great way of doing it. But in the end, like Nate said, if you're gripping too hard, nothing's going to fix it. Like, you're just try squeezing something really hard and holding that for 7 hours and 12 minutes. What your race was, it's going to be really difficult. There's also grips, like really play into this. I find that most brands ship like firm grips that are smaller in diameter. Some people need bigger diameter grips that are softer. And in some cases, it might be the opposite. But experiment with the grips that you have, change those around. Roll your bars forward or backward. Like your bars don't have a fixed position in the stem. They have these bends to the bars intentionally set there so that you can utilize them in different areas that fit your geometry best. So like roll your bars forward. And what that will do is that will be less of your hands tilted back toward you. And instead what it will be is more of your hands tilted up. And maybe that's more comfortable for you. Like the outside of your hands tilted upward.
And
you can
the
really
position of your
play
brake
around with a
levers.
lot of that stuff.
And the positioning
Huge.
brake levers, if they're rotated too far forward or too far back, like you can hinge at the wrists and put weird undue pressure on like the heel of your hand if they're not in the right position too. And that's worth playing around with.
Yeah. And I see most people putting them too low, right, Ivy? Not too high. It's like BMX stuff from way back in the day. We used to get a bike when we were a kid and the lever was pointing straight down, right?
Yep.
And it's not like that on a mountain bike. You don't want to run that.
John, you talk
reasons.
about farmer's carries too. If you're doing 30 reps of deadlift, the same thing. You get the same, your hands. Don't use wrist wraps. Try to do it with deadlift and, do an appropriate rep range too. I mean, weight. Not too light, but not too strong. You kind of want to have failure, I think, at that around that 20 to 30 rep mark. And then I would do, after warm up, do 2 sets. You don't really need a 3, I think, in this case. Yeah,
for sure. The most effective thing too for me for back pain is just making sure that I'm doing strength training routines that work my core in dynamic ways. And that's everything from my butt all the way up to my shoulders, right? And if I'm doing that sort of thing, it makes it so that I'm stable on the bike and I don't have to worry about that stuff quite as much.
Well,
Ivy.
While we are giving Jacob good methods to prepare for a long ride like this, I really do think that this is a case of changing something to your setup the day of the race. And I really do think that Jacob was just like seriously like gripped and bouncing around. And I think that's probably had a lot to do with why hands and back were hurting.
Yeah. It's probably super intense. You had all the Lifetime Grand Prix athletes racing this race. You had Tom Pidcock racing this race. I bet the energy was super intense to be at that start line. And for even though us average folks, Jacob, I don't know, maybe you were, set to be up at the front before the flat and stuff. But I know even as me that will not be racing with those people, I still feel the same energy. Still makes me race really hard. And that can be a situation where, it cooks you. So I think the last thing to mention too is if you're just in the saddle or out of the saddle and you're surging constantly and you're just putting out this huge power to try to stay with the group, especially there where it's so punchy, if you're blowing your pacing plan, it's not just going to make itself manifest in the term of my legs and my lungs are tired. The rest of your body's also going to get tired, particularly if it's a bunch of really hard surges. It's going to tire out and particularly, your back. So, okay, Colin's question. I'm from Belgium and I recently discovered your podcast. I absolutely love it. I'm trying to catch up with all the previous episodes, so I don't know if you've already talked about this topic. And Cohen, we have, but perhaps not in this light, so we'll cover it again. How do you know what your ideal weight is? Since a few years now, I'm training more and more and putting attention to my nutrition. I've dropped weight from 79 to 73 kilograms, and I'm 1 meter 83 centimeters. I imagine there is a certain point where further weight loss won't give you any benefits anymore. How do you know when you reach this point? And is this by checking your total fat percentage, or are there any other indicators? I've also noticed this. In recent weeks, I've increased my carb intake during training a lot. I was only doing 30 grams per hour, and now I'm doing 60 to 90. And since doing this, I haven't really dropped more weight, maybe even gained a bit. Thanks, guys, and keep up the good work. That's from Cohen. Nate, the gaining weight because you're taking in more carbs, he might have been depleted and now he just has more glycogen storage within his muscles, which is also water weight, right? Kind of like taking creatine in a way.
Every gram of glycogen also has 2 grams of water with it. So if
Is
you
it
are
4?
depleted,
I can't remember. 4?
I think it's 2, but I don't know.
Okay, yeah.
We can do it post.
Yeah.
Figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. So that could be the case for the recent weight gain, that sort of thing. But Ivy, your first thoughts when you read this one here?
I just realized I should do some conversions from
cool.
kilograms
then
to
I'm
pounds.
I'm going to jump in and share the thoughts while you do those.
Yeah, I mean, but, we're looking at 175 pounds. And I don't want to be too critical of people that are looking for body composition changes that are, to optimize your performance. That's fine. And I think I can be hard on people that do that pretty frequently because it's kind of dangerous to get into that, which I think might be happening here when you start to fixate so much on how to optimize your body composition for performance that you might be hindering your performance in the long term. And so I think I forget that there are people, I don't think this applies to this athlete writing in, but I know there are athletes that do need to or want to drop weight to be healthy and reach a healthy body composition. And that approach is really different. But go ahead, John, finish your thought.
Yeah. 6 foot tall athlete and 175 pounds. That's that's a pretty slim cyclist build. Or I should say even perhaps for like a higher performance athlete, that's within what you would expect. Like if you see a pro cyclist that's 6 foot tall, seeing 175 pounds wouldn't be out of the question. So just judging by that in and of itself, you're probably already on track. And like Ivy said, it's probably super important here to separate the two when you're trying to lose weight for health reasons, like a significant amount of weight versus trying to optimize body composition. But man, the more and more I've seen this with myself and then with other athletes, I think that assuming that you are in the path of wanting to optimize your body composition, you don't have a ton of weight to lose for health, you just want to optimize it. The best way to reach optimization is to fuel your work and then do your workouts, and then it will become what it is. And that's what your body's good at finding that balance. But if you find yourself in a spot where you're not like a well-controlled diet in the sense that, you aren't looking at what you're taking in, you're taking a lot of stuff that's like high in fat and highly processed, those sort of things, it gets tougher for your body to be able to optimize its body composition. And it comes down to like those choices. But this seems like a pretty good weight, just like weight to height ratio, right? 6 foot 175. That's not far off of what I'd expect.
Yeah, and it depends on body composition too. But like you said, if you train a bunch and you're fueling, the body composition will just come, and you'll get a natural point that is probably ideal for you. And I know we look at the pro tour cyclists and think we need to be at like 4% body fat. Going back to the glycogen thing too, you are right. It is 3 to 4 grams for every gram of water. And what is interesting about that is if you lose about 250 to 300 grams of glycogen in weight loss, you lose about 1 to 1.5 kilograms, or about 2 to 3.5 pounds of just water weight. Like
it's
just
crazy.
So, and that's why people, when you start like a keto diet, you lose weight really fast, because if you only lose 300 grams of glycogen, you're losing almost 3 pounds, or a little over 3 pounds. Interesting, very interesting. So that's why people start eating carbs. They go, I'm bloated, I can't believe this. But actually it improves your performance. And I get into this right now because I started Adderall, and Adderall makes it harder to eat, appetite suppressant. And just in like weight training, going back to back days are tough unless I like force myself to eat a lot. And same thing with cycling too. If you're getting really tired from your workouts or your performance is dropping off, there's a recovery issue somewhere. And it's either going to be sleep, calories and carbs, or some kind of stress. And then you'll hit an upper limit. And if you're optimizing sleep and you're getting plenty of sleep, and you're not overly stressed, I would try to make sure your calories are there before you say, hey, this is my natural upper limit.
Yeah. And this is, Nate, you brought up the interesting point of like, what was it, 260 grams of carbs that would be
250 to 300. Yeah.
And if you look at that, that's like maintaining 160 watts for 2 hours. If you are theoretically only burning glycogen, boom, that's gone. So to show like how much weight fluctuates, it's a lot, especially when you're training regularly. Depending on when you measure your weight, everything else, you're going to get a really different result. And also, if you do a workout, you've drained a ton of water from your body through sweat and then also through glycogen depletion. Like you've lost a lot of that. It's also probably going to change things if you have one of those scales that's going to measure your body composition with running like current through your body. Those like the Garmin Index, for example, which is a great scale. It'll even change things there. So it's important to like measure consistently if you are going to do it. What I mean by that isn't you don't have to measure every day. Just make sure you do it under similar circumstances, like in the morning when you wake up or whatever it may be. It's probably going to be the easiest time to do it. I've performed really well and even like had watt kg PRs at different body fat percentages. And I think that's probably important to point out that it doesn't come down to I perform best when I'm 6% body fat, and that's when it works best. But looking at TrainerRoad, I can see my PRs across different time frames, and I can compare them. And looking at that, I've gotten PRs at different times and at different durations. I've gotten power PRs at different body fat percentages. And then if you look at Strava, when that like rubber meets the road sort of a thing on KOMs, I've also climbed faster being at higher body fat percentages sometimes because it enables me to have more power. It can't be overestimated how important that is. So
yeah, and when we're talking, when we're talking about your optimal body composition, that's I think what you're referring to, John. Is it doesn't mean optimal isn't as skinny as you can be pound per pound. It's the composition in which you can perform best and go faster. And that's why my approach now is I don't look at the scale. If I am healthy from a medical perspective and nutritionally meeting all my needs to fuel performance and training, beyond that, I can't like know what the scale says beyond that, If I'm just checking the boxes and making sure I'm fueling my workouts. Like that's it. Go ahead, Nate.
So we have the Apple Health data stuff, and we have a project to pull in like scale data, and we be able to get in the body fat percentage. It'd be really cool to correlate body fat percentage and watt kg and see what the range are, like a distribution of people at different watt kg for the people that do have that data. Because I bet you'll be surprised that you might think that everyone's at this really low level of body fat, but I bet you it's a pretty big range, and it's not as low as you think. But it is probably not going to be, you know, the 4.5 watts per kilo, probably not a 30% body fat or 25. It's, you know, probably going to under 20, I would guess. I don't think it's going to be as grouped tightly. And I think there'll probably be a cutoff point where it's just kind of, it's going to be more in genetics, other stuff. But that'd be really cool to show a correlation. And, you know, correlation is not causation too. It just might be that the people who, you might have a genetic ability to have less body fat than other people, and that could be the reason why you have the watt kg, not rather than somebody's specifically dieting down to a certain level. You know, even those people, Keegan is like wrapped skin on muscle, and he eats more than anyone. I don't think I've ever heard of him dieting. But he also does crazy volume. But I think that he has also very special genetics, and I would not compare ourselves to the best in the world with these genetics. Where I think Keegan probably was ripped since he was like 12, I'm guessing. And
probably.
No, seriously, like his whole life, right? Veins in his quads kind of thing. And most of us will never ever be there.
There's great examples of athletes that don't look like that. Look at Wout van Aert. Wout does not look like he is some sliced down, wrapped in saran wrap dude, and performs extremely well. And on the women's side, you have Annemiek van Vleuten, and then you have Demi Vollering, and they look like they're totally different athletes too. So like it's, there's a range. That would be really cool, Nate. I think it takes so much work to get to like whatever the high performance is that it would be so silly for us to think that like our body wouldn't know the best way to get there in terms of body composition, and to think that we somehow need to intervene. Like your body, it has to go through so much to get to 4.5 watts per kilogram or whatever it might be. And to do that, it's like, yeah, man, like, don't worry. I'm changing you all the way along. Like I'm adjusting so then we're ideal for this sort of workout or with this sort of workload. You don't have to intervene and starve me. You don't have to intervene and do X, Y, and Z, you know?
It's all that consistency and not getting sick and not getting injured.
It's hard right now. Yeah.
Oh, when you're in Belgium, I mean, that's going to be flat races, right? Like that's going to be probably a little extra weight, a little extra power is going to be a good thing. You're not living in the Alps or something like that. So I would just keep doing what you're doing and not worry about those little small changes in body weight, you know, adjusting the carbs. That's messed me up before. John, you know, famously ate a salad on stage 2 of a race because he wanted
to go faster the next day.
So he ate a salad for dinner.
Choice.
I wouldn't even look at those day-to-day things, especially if you think it's impacting your what you're going to be doing or your performance. I do like to just track the data, but if not seeing the results and seeing it way later about what huge trends are, is probably a better way to do it.
I agree, Nate. I see Cohen as being an athlete that is excited about training and all of a sudden excited about getting faster, and like saw this thing happen where they dropped some weight and wants to kind of keep making gains. And I think now the focus should shift away from your weight as a raw number and shift instead to all these other performance indicators that we talk about all the time.
Power's king. Dan's question says, Dear TrainerRoad coaches, firstly, thank you. Brilliant and informative podcast. I get so much out of it. And so many riders and runners that I speak to do as well. Awesome. The runners. Nate, it's always surprising how many run activities we have, right? Like it's mind-blowing.
So much that I want the data to be checked. We're running like another check on it. It seems like it's too much. Like,
all y'all are closet runners, maybe, right? Like no one wants to reveal it. All these cyclists,
a bunch of nerds.
Oh my god! You've kept me company in many long journeys and always get me psyched for more training. So keep up the good work. Anyway, my question is about creatine and cramps. I've heard and keep hearing the benefits of creatine, and I've tried using it on 3 occasions. Once originally where I took 10 grams a day for a week, and then reduced it to 5 grams, and then twice where I took 3 grams a day. Each time I have ended up with debilitating cramps in my calf muscles. The first time it was after about a month, the second time was around 3 weeks, and this latest time was literally day 2 of taking it. The cramps were always in the night and woke me up with the pain, which then lasted for a week to 2 weeks. I hope that the cramp didn't last for a week to 2 weeks or it just recurred. It would be terrible. And then they mentioned that, kept him up, and he says, felt like it properly damaged my muscles. I always try to keep hydrated, and I've tried different brands of creatine. What am I doing wrong? Nate, you have taken creatine while training for cycling. I haven't, and I feel like I actually should. The research is like solid on it. It's something that I feel like I should do. But did you experience this? Like any correlation here?
And creatine has like benefits for cognitive function, and also maybe some. This is a maybe, but help for people with concussions, which I think we both had concussions, and that to me is well worth any extra water weight because you will hold extra water. Also, if you're doing a hot race, holding a little bit of extra water is not a bad idea. You sweat it out. Like I know it's not probably the best for performance, but overall for everything, I do think it is a good thing. And yeah, I would try it, John. But I've never experienced, I've experienced cramps, but they didn't coincide, especially when you're not exercising. That is the interesting part.
Yeah. Ivy, have you taken creatine?
You don't want to know what my experience with creatine is? When I played college volleyball, my mom dropped me off to my college apartment, and we went to Costco, and she got me a big jar of creatine, and I use it for, however month and a half that it lasted, and then she was gone, and I couldn't go to Costco, and I stopped using it forever. So that's my experience with creatine.
Nice.
I cannot contribute.
This one, in Antonio and colleagues in 2021, they did a review, a narrative review, where they said common questions and misconceptions about creatine supplementation. What does the scientific evidence really show? And this is a quote from it. It says, in the early 2000s, with limited data and based primarily on speculation, the American College of Sports Medicine recommended that individuals controlling their weight and exercising intensely or in hot environments should avoid the use of creatine supplementation. Why? The assumption here is that creatine shifts fluid distribution in the body to the cells and thusly could hinder thermoregulation. But here's the catch. Any studies done on this haven't been properly controlled, according to Antonio and colleagues. They basically said it was observational at best. They didn't control things like creatine dosage, fluid intake, ambient conditions, activity levels, nutrition intake, or prior conditioning. So all of this assumption that creatine could cause cramps, it was all based on observational correlations of uncontrolled studies. And it wasn't actually measuring cramps in a well-controlled environment that were coming from creatine. As a result, and in fact, there's studies proving the opposite. Greenwood and colleagues, they had college football players. They self-selected either creatine supplemented sports drinks or non-creatine sports drinks throughout the season. This is a bit more controlled because you had athletes following the same regimen and they were able to control this and observe this. And creatine users actually had significantly less cramping, heat illnesses and dehydration, muscle tightness, muscle strains, and total injuries compared to non-users.
I thought I messed it up there because I was like, you should use it in hot. And then it's in the early 2000s.
Yeah. So they actually had less. Now they self-selected. So you could say maybe more fit people wanted to take creatine because maybe they were in this habit, right? And maybe that was the cause. So that's also a bit weak there. But creatine was shown to decrease muscle cramping also in other studies with non-athletic subjects. Particularly, they were looking at people in senior care facilities, and they were struggling with cramps. It's more common as age goes on, like those nighttime cramps. And they actually tried creatine supplementation, which based on the prior evidence is pretty torturous for them to consider doing that. But they tried it, and they actually found that it reduced. I don't know what else they were giving them because, once again, this wasn't tightly controlled or anything, but that's worth pointing out. Antonio and colleagues, they say, in summary, experimental and clinical research does not validate the notion that creatine supplementation causes dehydration and muscle cramping. In other words, we have some studies that prove that it doesn't. We only have observational correlations that weren't tightly controlled that assumed that it might. So based on that, there isn't any evidence actually showing that creatine does indeed cause cramps. What could cause the cramps, though? Any number of different things. You take creatine, maybe you're training extra hard. Maybe you are not nourishing yourself in one way or another because you feel like you're taking in that maybe recovery shake, and that recovery shake has creatine in it, but maybe you're skipping a meal that you would typically have because you're having that recovery shake. I don't know. There's a lot of different things that could come into this, but at least in terms of the scientific research, it doesn't seem like it's caused it at all. And it's honestly, Nate, to your point for training, this seems like a great way to be able to get a boost from training. Creatine isn't an expensive supplement compared to something like ketones. It's something that's widely available too. Like you can get creatine at Walmart in the United States, like anywhere, you know? So it's something that's widely available and easy to use. And if you're using it all throughout your training, let's say that you go off of it when you get to your goal race. So then you aren't, maybe you'll drop some weight as a result of that going into the race. Seems like a great idea and kind of almost like a defense mechanism to keep more water on board. Because without water, that's where we find ourselves getting into trouble with training and recovery.
I mean, it's the weight gain. That's the one negative that people have. I think it is the most studied supplement in the world. It's basically safe.
And WADA approved for sure.
It is. Correct. You still want to make sure that because you can get into some fringe creatine that's like blended in with pre-workout or something else like that.
Don't do that.
Don't take those. Because that's pre-workout stuff is not tightly controlled at all. So you might find yourself with amphetamines and everything else in your blood and popping on a positive test or something. So
there's different forms of creatine, and creatine monohydrate is the one that's the most studied and safe and effective.
Yeah,
Not saying the other ones
great.
aren't, but that's the most studied.
Also, I think we've talked about this with protein drinks. Like if you have protein or you have creatine, it's typically taken in a shake, whereas you otherwise would maybe skip fueling yourself right after your workouts. Just knowing that you have to take in a shake to take in your creatine might also force you to take in more nutrients right after training, which is a beneficial thing to being able to help yourself recover better.
Creatine, though, does not have to be taken after training. You can take it any time during the day. And you don't need to do a loading phase. It will just get you to a full amount of stores more quickly. I personally do more than which is needed because I don't have any gastrointestinal issues and the rest just leaves. But yeah, 3 to 5 grams per day is probably a good dose for most people.
Yeah, that 10 is pretty intense there. So cool. All right, let's end this one on some hot takes. If you are listening to this podcast right now and you have not yet rated it, please do that. Go to Spotify, rate it. I also think that we're going to start having video on Spotify, so that could be really cool. So you can see that on there.
What?
So stay tuned. Yeah, exciting stuff. We'll talk about it more afterward. But just the same, so rate the podcast because that's huge, and it happens every week. So the more ratings we get that week, the more likely our podcast will show up in search results that week. Wow. So it's not just they got a lot of ratings once and that's it. Yes, that does help, but as we get ratings all along the way, that's what helps us most. So please do that. Helps more people find the podcast. More people sign up for TrainerRoad. We can build more cool features like the ones that we were talking about earlier. Ivy, it's time for hot takes.
Okay. Oh, I get to read them? Because this is my thing.
Yeah, why not? Yeah, it's your thing.
All right. Hot take. Nate needs to be on the podcast more often again, and he needs to wear those glasses all the time. Nate, do you have your glasses nearby?
No, in the car. But I will, I am available for the podcast every Wednesday, Wednesday. And I had those glasses on going to my son's soccer practice, and he asked me to take them off.
Oh no!
Regular ones.
Was it too intimidating or what?
Reno's not ready for those glasses.
Yeah. Understood. Yeah.
In 5 or 10 years, it'll be cool in Reno. And then,
Yeah. Can I dispel a little bit the reason that Nate hasn't been on the podcast as much is because Nate was more focused on the product and on building those sort of things and not being on the podcast and just time allocation. So that's where it's been.
Things kept, I got pink eye, and then I had a surgery on the ones that I was going to be on. Yeah. So things happened, but I'm down to be on.
We're glad you're here.
If you go to the forum, there's conspiracy theories, abound about the fact that Nate hasn't been on for this many weeks and connect red dots of string and all that stuff. So yeah.
AI has taken over his body and All right. Hot take. As competitive cyclists, we lose out on the lifestyle cycling culture. We can't do both. What do you think, John? What do you consider to be lifestyle cycling culture? When you hear that, what do you think of?
Like bike packing or wearing t-shirts and Lycra on my bike or something. I don't know. That's what I'm wondering.
Stopping for coffee in the middle of a ride, and pastries for an hour.
Sure.
I think that's possible though. People still do that.
Yeah, riding. I think about socialization on rides, riding however long or wherever you want to, not sticking to the structure of training. And at first when I read this hot take, I was like, oh, no, you can do both. You can do these things outside of your structured training. But then when I think about a lot of the really competitive cyclists that I know, when I ask them to go on rides or like, hey, there's this group ride thing that we're doing, or like, hey, I want to ride to this spot because there's a really good brewery there and we can get a good beer there. It's always a no. Like, it's always like, got to do this today, got to do these,
Personally attacked.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exciting.
I guess the more I thought about it, maybe there isn't room for both if you're truly trying to be a competitive cyclist.
You just got to make room for what makes you happy on the bike. And like what makes you go. For some people, it's training, and that's like what they want. And it can change and ebb and flow. Like there are times of the year where I just want to go ride with my son, or like my dad got an e-bike and my dad like wants to ride with me now. And it's fun, right? To go like do a ride with my dad. That's really cool. And then there are other times of the year where I'm just like, nope, I want to train. And that's like what I want. So I don't think that they need to exist in isolation. And honestly, if you feel like you're being torn away from the enjoyment part of cycling because you're training too much, then drop to a lower volume plan. So then you can still have those things in your life on the bike. You can have both. I think you also don't have to have both.
It's the riding for enjoyment versus purpose. Like, what's your primary motivator? But a lot of times purpose is the enjoyment if you have a big goal. And that's when then I would say, I'm not going to stop for this hour coffee thing because I want to get in this structured like 5-hour ride so that I can perform well at this event that I've been training for 8 months. And I can get coffee some other time with you. Like, so that's how you can.
Yeah.
So.
I agree. And like John said, it can, it can change, and there's room for both. And I think it's okay as long as your expectations for your results as a competitor are realistic based upon what you make space for. Like, you can do enjoyment rides and have lifestyle cycling culture if you want to, along with being a competitive cyclist. If you don't beat yourself up when your results aren't like perfect, and you can't point to this thing that you chose because it's fun and then be like disappointed that you're not a better competitor because of those things. You have to be very deliberate in where they all fit together before and during the approach.
Yep. Well said.
Okay. Hot take: crit racing is more dangerous now than it used to be. Yikes.
No, I think our awareness of it is just higher. More people with GoPros.
Yeah,
racing.
better documentation.
Yeah. And maybe like a situation where athletes with GoPros are perhaps emboldened to like do a courageous move or something because it's going to show up on social media. I don't know. But I personally haven't seen any increase in... Granted, I actually didn't even race a crit this year, which is crazy. First time I don't even know how many years I didn't race a crit. But in my experience, I haven't seen an increase in that. But if I watch social media, for sure, it seems like it.
Yeah,
because those are the videos that get the
and the
views.
ones that get exactly. Those are the videos that get the views.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, the only counter argument I have is that because there are so fewer crits, I feel like versus 10 years ago, the calendar is so much smaller. I do feel like maybe those crit racers feel more pressure to get a result in those fewer opportunities, and so are maybe willing to take more risks as a result. Could be.
Yeah, fair point.
Yeah.
Tulsa's terrifying, but yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that again.
Yeah.
So,
okay, Jonathan, this is a good one for you. Hot take: I can succeed both in XCO and enduro.
yeah, it's like, honestly, I think one of the best pairings that you could have. I think it's because if you train for XCO, just train for XCO, and then if you have good technical skill, or if you work on your technical skill, you'll smash enduro too. Like, this is going to come off, maybe this is a hot take in and of itself, but the average enduro racer is like further away from peak performance than the average cross-country racer. Like, when you go to an enduro field, you have a lot of people that are filling out lower and like further away from the leader. Whereas when you go to an XCO race, you have everybody's a bit closer to that. Like, the average performance level is higher. So if you go into enduro, and many times it is like fitness is the limiter with a lot of enduros, yeah, you'll crush it. So yeah, it's like perfect pairing. I wish I could race more enduro, but it's like parallel universe me wishes that, because I don't want to deal with the risk. But man, it's so much fun. Like, yeah, I get a rush out of it, but I don't want to hurt myself. So
Nate, would you ever do an enduro?
Yeah, there just need to be one that is not insane because it was during. It was close to,
Oh my God. I'm so excited.
not anymore. I mean, I would have. I would have before.
Now.
But I was having fun at North Star going through there, and the SB 150 was like, it really made things feel comfortable and like a lot safer. But the one that they had at North Star, like the Vietnam, it was
the EWS
it was insane.
race. Yeah.
I could not walk down. It was something I could walk down. I'd want to do, but yeah, I had fun.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a cool format, man. You get to chill with your friends and then go really hard on the segment and then catch up with your friends and cruise again. It's like how we all want to ride bikes. It's cool.
Yeah. All right.
It's lifestyle.
Yeah, lifestyle cycling.
And competitive.
That's the answer.
All right. Hot take, you don't need disc brakes in Florida at all. And I think the hot take is that you don't need disc brakes for areas with mostly flat terrain. I don't agree with this because there have been moments where, in a flat terrain setting, having a close call with like a car or like a car door pedestrian where I've been so, so grateful that my disc brakes work the way that they are intended to, like really quickly and, powerfully. Yeah.
It rains in Florida.
Yeah. Like that's like,
and I don't think the
reason
drivers
number
are super nice in Florida that are going to give you that extra room. Yeah. The rain, that's a huge thing. Performance goes, for those who know, when it rains, performance on rim brakes, especially carbon rims, can go way, way down to where it is. John's eyes are open. It is scary. Like you push on it and you don't stop. You don't stop. You don't stop.
Like my TT bike is rim brakes and all the brakes are noisemakers. I pull the levers and they make noise, but they don't stop. It's just like
it's like a party.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's terrifying. Yeah. Let go of rim brakes, everybody. It's ridiculous.
I just remembered, maybe it's going to be on the podcast. I had a dream last night that I was going down a very steep hill cycling. It was like in a race and an ambulance was going down. And I was like, someone tried to keep up with John. And then there's everybody, there was somebody with rim brakes on. And they were riding the rim brakes and their wheel was on fire. And then there were like hundreds of people walking their bike down the course.
This podcast is a metaphor.
Oh
you should talk to your therapist about this, Nate. I apologize for forcing you into something.
Dude, this is Nate's weight mare. The way that waiters, people that wait tables have dreams about it 10, 15 years later. Be like, oh my God, the restaurant's full. No one has anything. I have 40 tables. This is Nate's version of that, is he's going to have horrible bike nightmares for 20 years.
The one I still have like 10 years after triathlon is that I would come to T2 where I go to my bike and my bike either isn't set up or the tires are flat. And I'm doing great and I can't find a pump and the tires are flat. Or my bike's in my bike bag or something like that or in the car. And I just forgot.
Oh, man.
It's the worst. Yeah. Yeah. Rim brakes. No one should sell a bike with rim brakes in 2023. Let's get rid of them.
Okay.
They're just dangerous.
Illegal.
Yeah. So I'm okay with that. I'm usually not cool with that stuff. Yes, please. Let's make it illegal.
All right. This one's cool. Hot take, beef jerky and fruit leather is the best ride food.
Oh.
Do you roll them up together?
Oh my gosh. That sounds
cinnamon roll?
No.
Half beef, half carbs.
If you like stopping along the side of the road at every gas station, sure. Like this will to have to go to bathroom. This sounds terrible. Like a gut bomb. A bunch of protein to slow it down, fat too, and then fruit leather, a bunch of fiber. Like this sounds terrible.
The same athlete that submitted this brought up that there is some research, I think it was Stacy Sims specifically, that brought up that women maybe need protein during rides. And, the research that I saw about this, like I looked into it very, very briefly, but digesting solid foods, specifically protein-rich ones, can divert blood flow away from the muscles and to the digestive system, which we don't want, right? The whole focus of eating during exercise should be to fuel your working muscles. And so to divert energy away from it into digestion is bad. So maybe that protein thing can apply if it's not solid food. But when we're looking at solid food, specifically jerky, a big piece of jerky is 80 calories and just has 2 grams of carbs. So you're really like, if you were to do this, it would be for protein and because you want savory food. If
good flavor balance, I guess.
Yeah. If you want to have some
but everything else, bad.
Beef jerky at the end of your ride or near the end, like I get it. I am so sick. If I have to eat one more piece of candy on a bike ride, like I'll end it all. I can't. I just really need more savory ride food options. So I get it in that regard. Beef jerky is the best ride food, but from a performance perspective. Maybe not. Yeah.
Just the dryness of it, like trying to chew it.
I know.
And like tiring of chewing and like swallow it while you're cycling.
Okay,
horrible.
wait, have you had those Epic meat bars? It's like spicy sriracha chicken.
I see them everywhere.
Oh my gosh, they're so good. I love them. They're so good. They're not super dry. This is not a sponsor plug. They do not sponsor me. Yeah. I love them, and I get them for like travel days too. They're not dry.
Call me
awesome.
space food. Call me space food guy. Whatever. I'm okay with it. But like, take BCAAs if you need to, and you really want to take. The research isn't conclusive on that really helping. Like prolong your ability to perform or anything else like that. Just taking a lot of your protein outside of your ride. But if you really need to, BCAAs. Like, I don't know. That sounds terrible. So if you need something salty, I don't know, grab a small bag of chips or something at the store. But that's got a lot of fat. That's going to slow down digestion too. So, yeah.
Just eat candy. You got to deal with it. Just eat candy. You just got to deal with it.
That's right. Yeah.
All right. Hot take. Embryo cream does more pain than good for cyclocross. Or we could just apply this to any cold discipline. Did you guys like Embryo? Do you like Embryo? Nate, did you like it when you were racing?
Yeah, I didn't really feel a ton of it though, but I liked it.
I've used really hot Embryo before, and it was like screaming in the shower, the pain.
Yeah.
That was the first time I used it. I didn't know that once you actually put hot water on, like, I don't know if the capsaicin was reactivated, but oh my gosh, the pain was severe. Like, I felt like I was literally standing on fire. So that's something to keep in mind. Yeah.
Should we say what Embryo cream is?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's not that common.
Yeah.
Embrocation.
Embrocation is it's a chemical irritant it's meant to put on your skin for cold weather specifically. And the intent of it is to cause your blood to, when your blood wants to retreat back into your core when it's really cold, to protect your vital organs and keep them warm. Embrocation redirects blood back into your lower extremities, like your legs or arms. Or I know some people that put it on top of their hands, like on top of their hands for really cold weather. So it's stimulating the blood vessels in the skin around the extremities where you put embrocation. So
it's usually like Vaseline or something, effectively like that same consistency or something thicker than Vaseline.
Right.
Is what it's like when you put it on.
Yeah. And feels like,
but let's be real. The main reason we all use Embryo is because it makes our legs look super shiny and buff. That's why Embryo is really used. In a race, when I've had Embryo on, I felt really hot before, but I've never felt like I was cold, now I'm warm because of Embryo. The only thing that I found it to help with is like in rain. It's like another barrier of like from the water soaking your skin, I feel like. So you don't feel like the cold when your legs get wet as much when you have a layer of oily Vaseline style stuff on your legs, you know?
Totally. I agree. Yeah. All right. Last hot take.
It hurts so bad in a hot shower.
I wonder.
Bad.
I've had that experience like mildly, but like, does it have to do like, did you shave your legs like the morning of the race and then put it on?
Maybe I did.
You know?
Yeah.
That could be it.
Yeah, it was mad, but when I put it on, it didn't burn. It was like, it tingled and it was hot, like it normally is supposed to be. It was like the hottest Mad Alchemy stuff, I think, on accident. And then once I got into the shower, reactivated. Yeah, it was bad. So,
really funny about that brand. It's super cute. Their Embryo jars and their chamois cream jars look the same. Did you know that?
Yeah. Yeah, it's
no
bad.
Way.
I didn't know that. Design, and then I knew that.
Oh, no.
Yikes. Yeah, yikes.
Yeah. It does cause more pain than good.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Last hot take. Tires without ramped knobs are slow and should not be used for anything besides downhill. Jonathan, what do you think? This one's all you.
Yeah, 100%.
Can you describe a ramped knob on a tire?
Yeah, it's putting like Schwalbe on blast, I think, in particular, because they have like knobs that are just squares instead of the front or the leading edge. In other words, like the edge of the knob that will make contact with the ground. On a lot of tires, you'll see that they, instead of being square, they have like a ramped and angled surface. Instead of being a right angle, it'll have like an angled area. And the intent there is that it helps with rolling resistance, I think a brand like Schwalbe runs those in many cases, not all cases, but a lot of their tires don't have ramp knobs. And then they say, well, we use a more supple casing and softer rubber. So as a result, like it balances out or something like that. But I tend to agree with this one. I think it's kind of silly. Like I think especially cross country or normal mountain biking or cyclocross, everything should be ramped big time. So the only thing it hurts is like climbing traction. But if you're slower, or I should say, if you're running bigger tires, then you can probably run lower pressure and you're getting great traction anyway, and then better rolling resistance with it. So
wait, was that ramped knobs hurt climbing traction?
Yeah. So if they're ramped knobs, then it's harder to like bite into the ground. That's why you would want a non-ramped knob, is because it can bite into the ground on that leading edge and help a little bit. So
wouldn't it hurt braking too?
It could. Let me think. But not as much. And that's why the backside of them are not ramped. And that's why they're more of a right angle. So that way, because the backside of the knob becomes more activated when you're braking a bit more, and like the top of the knob, whereas the leading edge is the main thing that's concerning when you're accelerating. So
it seems like it would still be the front.
I might have it backwards.
Yeah, because you're pushing. You're pushing into the ground in front.
Hey, was that a fidget spinner?
Yeah.
Oh, that's pretty sweet.
Great.
That's I interrupt less if I fidget spin.
It's got to be the middle and the back too. That's got to be more in play when you brake, I would think. So engineers or internet engineers, let us know down in the comments below. You don't have to tell us if you're an internet engineer. So just tell us down below if ramp knobs matter when braking. But yeah, I kind of agree with that. I don't know. I've never ridden a tire without ramp knobs and been like, wow, my life is so much grippier. But I have noticed that they're like, whoa, I feel like I'm pedaling a tank tread. So,
I've never noticed the difference either way.
You're a Schwalbe guy though. You always have been, So maybe this just comes down to a brand bias. Max Assessment, only tire you need.
No, don't listen to him.
Is that it, Ivy? We're all done?
Yeah, I think that we're done with hot takes.
Great. Thanks everybody for listening. Submit your questions at trainerroad.com/podcast. Nate, good to have you back on the podcast. Stay tuned for next week's episode, everybody, and go to trainerroad.com if you're listening to this right now to go check out some new features. Pretty exciting stuff. Head over to the TrainerRoad forum and you can see a summary of what's new. You can check that out. It'll be pinned to the top of the forum, so when you go there, it'll be easy to find. We'll talk to you all next week. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.